Got it.
Will, can you make yourself 10% bigger, 10% taller? Go under style, and there's a slider for size.
I'm doing it.
And there you go. And size actually does matter.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show.
All right, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. We have a great guest lined up today, our friend Ken Rona. But before we get to Ken, Will, we have to have some banter, and I have a little news for you.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm mad at you.
Again? This is news?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to guess why?
No.
That's probably a good answer. I wore these new glasses last week at LensCrafters North Hills, just outside of downtown Raleigh. LensCrafters sponsorship opportunities. Yes. And you didn't notice then, and we've been bantering in our green room, and you haven't noticed them again.
I'm very sorry.
Now I noticed you've got a nice golf shirt. Who's the logo? BRC?
No, that's Grove Park Inn.
Nice.
So there's another sponsorship opportunity. Sorry, I didn't notice your glasses.
Well, I think you're doing the totally wrong approach here. Okay. I think like, John, stop being so vain. Like, not everyone needs to notice everything about you. You're loved anyway. Moving on.
Fading out.
I've known the guy a little while.
Can we just have a podcast first where one of our guests has broken the fourth wall and come into the banter section? Not only come into the banter section, but kick the damn door down.
It's classic.
And I am going to show you why you did that when we get to your superpowers. And we'll decide later, was that a superpower moment or a kryptonite moment? All right. Will, more fun. You ready? I'm getting better at this.
Yes, and your glasses are lovely.
Thank you. Sponsorship opportunities. So I'm just waiting. Last week it was Wegmans. It certainly could be the beautiful people at LensCrafters in North Hills, North Carolina, just outside of downtown Raleigh. Open 7 days a week. Very nice prices, very nice models. Or it could be whatever is on your golf shirt. They're welcome to come in now. Ken, we're trying to monetize this goddamn thing.
What I think is funny is, John, is as you're moving your hands, your big hands are showing.
I know, my big hands. And folks, you'll learn what big hands means in a second. And it doesn't mean what you think it means. Let me be honest. Okay, so then from last week, and I'm going to tout my own detail orientation. Do you remember the homework you gave me, Will?
About fixing that slide?
No. You suggested, and it's rare, but you suggested a good idea, which was
that doesn't happen. That's why I got confused.
We should put all of our guests into the famous OAD grid. And you noticed last week, you said we have another John Lane quadrant. And look at everybody in the upper right. And Ken, you're our first non-host guest that is outside of the upper right. So we're going to see what that's all about.
I'm an innovator.
You are an innovator.
Look at that. And we're in the same quadrant.
Yes, you are. And I forget what you are. Yeah, but we'll talk about it. And you guys can reminisce while I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah?
So here, once again, John.
Yes, sir.
Since it needs to be about you, well done. Thank you very much.
Well,
it's beautiful. Appreciate
that. We're going to come back
to
this at the end because it's not.
You couldn't have pulled that off without those new glasses. They helped you see what you were doing.
But as we like to say in the Lane family, take the compliment. So I will thank you. And moving on. So once again, I'm John Lane.
I'm Will Barfield, I think.
And we are a work in progress. And we are joined today live from Breaking Through the Fourth Wall with my dear old friend, client, pandemic buddy, whatever you want to say, Ken Rona. Ken, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks, Will. Nice to meet you, Will. And John, thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Lovely to meet you.
So everyone wants to know this, and I didn't green room you on this. Why do you say Kenneth in your LinkedIn, but everyone I know calls you Ken? Is that a honeypot?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting point. So when I get an email that says Kenneth Rona, I'm like, you're out.
That's what I mean by honeypot. Yeah.
Letter, yeah. So I certainly informally use it that way, but I did not strategically do that. When you type these things in, they say full name, and I dutifully like Kenneth Rona.
Rule follower.
So literally, that's it. It is literally every time it says full name, I just say, okay, here it is.
We are going to get into that. Okay. There's big hands. I'm not sure. Okay, we may have fixed one problem, and created 5 more. Okay, let's get into the show. So here is our typical mini commercial message. The superpowers and kryptonites are really derived from personality traits that come from the OAD survey. OAD is Organizational Analysis and Design. Will and I are distributors. If anybody ever wants to know more, hit us on the DM. That's all I'll say. Let's get into this. Will, you know what I'm going to say, right?
I do. Do you want me to say it, or do you want to say it?
I think you should try it again this week. It worked so well last week.
Ken, do you like John's glasses?
Yes.
No,
in comedy, that's called a callback. So well done.
Yes. Ken, how does it feel to be reduced to a 2-dimensional table, sir?
I am a data. So in the old days, you would have called me a statistician. Now they call what I do data science, even though it's not. It really
definitely got fancier, didn't it? Since you started.
It did,
yeah.
And so I'm actually, and I'm a trained PhD social scientist, and so I am super comfortable with it. I get a lot of value from these, from tests like this, right, to help you understand yourself better. So it doesn't bother me at all. My wife has this line. She says, "Yes, sweetie, you're special, just like everyone else."
She's got you. She's got you nailed down.
I embrace the fact. Well, she deals with high school students a lot, and so that's where the line comes out.
Very nice.
But I've embraced the fact that like a lot's measurable, and even if we don't want to admit it, like there is a lot that is measurable about us.
Great. Okay. Well, this is the part of the show where I explain what the hell this is all about. And I'll do that now. So this is a typical OAD table. We're really going to talk about these 4 constructs. And so you can see that Ken's dominant. Oh, sorry, do this. Will, just sidebar, Ken, give us a second. I got to figure out this software because I don't seem to have a mouse that works over the slides. And I find that difficult because I can't point at anything. So I'm going to have to verbalize it. So if you see the little red line in the middle, that is the median line. Median or mean, Ken? You'll have to help me learn how to remember that.
This looks like the mean.
Okay, good.
Like the average. Mean is the average.
The arithmetic average, as my Jesuit high school teachers would have tried to beat into my head. Okay, so Ken's 2 dominant traits are assertiveness and patience. And that, you saw the assertiveness when he broke the 4th wall.
Assertively patient.
So I think we know that. Let's talk about patience for a second. Patience is definitely patience, but it's also you like a structured environment, right? As a data scientist, I would think that having things in order so you can work with that makes sense. And then his subordinate traits are stacked up on top of each other, so they're equivalent values to each other of extroversion and detail orientation. I think extroversion has a pretty well-known definition. In this case, anything that's far to the left means he's more technical. And then detail orientation is interesting because it can mean how much attention to detail do you pay? That's one version of it. Another one is how comfortable are you with delegating? And I know from personal experience, Ken, that you are very comfortable with delegating. In fact, you prefer it.
Yeah, I describe myself as a ruthless delegator. And so if there's somebody I can ask somebody to do something, and I'm pretty good with matching task to talent, and so I do that. I said pretty aggressively. The level that I'm typically best at is more strategic and directional. So like on the data science side, I appreciate, your audience may not kind of understand the intricacies of it, so I'll spare them. But there's a lot of ways to build a predictive model, which is at the core of what data science does. And you think that, well, building predictive models is all the same. Turns out there's a lot of different approaches, and so the things that I typically bring to the data science staff are interesting approaches. And then I say, hey, you know what? If you just do this, that might solve the problem. Why don't you try go at it that way? And they're like, oh, great. And so they do. And I like to say I get my bat on the ball on those. But I'd rather not be the hands-on keyboard person. I don't find working through the code. I do it all the time. The time's a little bit of a stretch, but I do it on occasion. But I don't really enjoy it. Like I much more enjoy seeing the answers and helping other people get there than doing it myself.
Great. Well, that sounds like a superpower. So I'm going to get to the will section in a second. But hang on. Did that come up? I do need to say out loud that I don't know if our audience understood what you just said, but Will and I definitely did not. Or I'll speak for myself. Will?
What?
Exactly. All right.
Gosh, I hate being misunderstood. Oh no, that's like, I have like a pit in my stomach now.
Oh no, I don't think you do. I don't think you do, but you do have some superpowers. He does have some superpowers, doesn't he, Will?
Yeah, it looks like 6.
And what kind of superpowers are they here?
So these, Ken, are your generic superpowers that fit in with the architect, independent generalist readout that anyone who's going to get, put in that quadrant is going to receive. So we won't spend a ton of time on these, but, is there one of these that is generic across the board to someone with your profile that you feel like is, pretty accurate or speaks to your personality or stands out?
Yeah, I think most people would say that I am conceptual, that I really do look to break a problem down to its generalized parts so that you can use whatever the solution is to other things. A lot of what I do is I said I help people figure out how to predict things, and the way that I think about it is, what are the underlying drivers of, let's say, a behavior. So like I have a PhD in behavioral economics, and the reason why is I really want to understand how people make decisions, but I'm not super interested in like, people, when you give them a number, like the next number you ask them is likely to be that number. It's called anchoring. Like there are any number of biases that people focus on, and I hate that. Right, the whole like focus on in my old field on finding phenomena, right, is not interesting to me. What's more interesting to me is going back 2 or 3 levels and saying why, like what is the underlying mechanism that led to that phenomena. That's much more interesting, right? So the cognition that's involved in that, and really that comes over into a lot of things in my life. Certainly professionally, I tend to be the strategist. The like, what are the drivers of the business? Not so much like, hey, how do I close the sale?
Understood. John.
Oh, I'm just gonna. You sort of answered it yourself, but I'll just ask you to probe a little bit. Like, does your mind, like, are you data scientist 24/7, or is there a flip that goes? I don't mean working 24/7. I just mean, do you bring that kind of conceptual, break it apart to like ordering Chinese food, for example? Like, is that like, do you really have to like break it apart to do it, or can you sort of turn that part off for certain tasks that just aren't really worth?
Oh no, you can't. As an aside, I have a friend, Dan Ariely, who's a kind of famous behavioral economist. People can go look up Dan Ariely, and he's a New York Times bestseller. But he did a whole series of experiments on how people order Chinese food. So when you said that, I thought that was funny. He does the same stuff with wine. No, you can't leave it on all the time. I mean, the thing I tell people is I can't really rush it. Right. So I can't turn on the conceptual thinking or turn it off. I can set a task going. I can be like, I need to think about this. And over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, as I'm, playing a video game or showering or driving the car quietly, bursts of inspiration come to me. And so it's very much it's kind of always on in the background, but it is not something that My wife would say, "Oh no, absolutely not." Like, you don't you react in the moment all the time.
Well, that sounds like a nice segue to the juicy stuff.
Right. So the kryptonite piece, right? The shadow side, when you're under pressure or stress or dealing with difficult situations, superpowers are inverted. Which one of these do you think, speaks to you or you'd want to comment on? And after this slide, we're going to move into more of your own
Good
self-evaluation.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, interestingly, some of them really don't resonate. Like that can be stubbornly persistent, except on problems. But I don't think of that as a kryptonite. But I think the uncommunicative at times. I think that the way I perceive it, like my behaviors are very obvious, and I'm responding to something very obvious. And if you're not paying attention, like the only reason for you not to understand what I'm saying is because you haven't paid attention. And probably I'd be better off just saying, "Hey, this thing really bothers me," as opposed to just kind of consistently messaging, right? I assume that people are being thoughtful about signaling and thoughtful about the words, but I expect that people are thinking about me much more than I'm thinking about them. Because frankly, I do think about them all the time, right? I do pick up on that stuff, and I really, it's part of the whole conceptual thinking thing. Like I would hate to say I know how John is wired, but I have a pretty good sense. And so I do that with people. I kind of try to figure out how they're wired, and I assume that people are trying to do that with me too. And I don't think that's actually true.
Interesting.
Well, I'll tell you this: whenever Ken doesn't like something I'm doing, he always ends with "But I love you." So
it's qualifying.
Nice. All right.
Well, it's part of what John needs to hear, right?
It is. It's exactly right.
But I know that actually, I'll tell a side story. My love language is compliments. So if people give me compliments, especially about being smart, and so someone I worked with the other day caught someone else saying something very kind about me, took a photo of it, right? Took a screenshot and sent it to me, and that was like the best gift of the day,
Nice. That's nice. All right, so Will, I think we got our generics in, and now here's some thoughts that Ken put together for us. Thank you for that.
And very detailed. Love how you put so much content in there.
I edited this. You should see the longer form.
We're going to single click here on this slide and probably double or triple click on the next one. Ken, something here that
we seem to be having a technical glitch. Okay, we're back.
Oh yeah, no, we saw you just fine. I mean, I talked a little bit about it already, but the piece around task delegation, right? So that last one, that I know I'm not great with details, is really about task delegation. So I know that about myself, and I said I'm a ruthless delegator, and I think that's that's better. Actually, in some ways, it's better in a moderate-sized organization because I have people to delegate to. When I'm the subject in what's the word I want? Individual level contributor, right? When I'm an individual contributor, I have to be really careful about sending work product that isn't finished, right? I always have to stop myself because I actually am not super patient about. I'm like, looks good, send it, and that's like.
We'll pick that up on the next slide, I think.
Yeah, it's probably more for the next slide. But I think my superpower there is I know that about myself, right? And so that I do a good job of delegating and managing, right? So I actually am a pretty good, I think people would say I'm a pretty good manager, so that I give them what they need to do the job effectively. I don't just be like, hey, I'm not just like, hey, solve that problem, I'm out. It's more like, hey, here's this problem, let's talk about it. Let me know if you need help. I check in with them to make sure things are going okay. If they've got it, then great. But if they need help, like I'm a good coach, I think, on that stuff.
So two-pronged question related to that before we escape here. One, how long does it take you to trust, right, that someone has earned the ability for you to know that when you hand that off, they're going to raise that child? And then two, how many strikes do I get, right? I mean, how many times do I fumble the ball before you take me out of the game? Just kind of how long does it take you to trust, and then how many chances do I get?
I actually, this maybe goes to John's earlier question. I actually have a little bit of a process around the trust building. So the first day we work together, even the first few days, I'm on top of you pretty tightly. And then as you kind of prove that you have good judgment and that you don't need help, I loosen it up and loosen up. And again, I think that folks who work with me, they don't even remember the first week or two, right? They just remember that, Ken would ask me to do something. And I have this phrase, trusted hands. So like there's some people who just, it's like football, right? Some people you give them the ball, they're not going to fumble it. And so I try to identify those folks, and those folks kind of have my trust implicitly. And I know, 15 of those folks in my life that I just like, whatever you ask them to do, they're going to take care of it, assuming they've agreed. So once the trust is there, I'd say you get it pretty fast. Once the trust is there, so let's say with one of these trusted hands in the most extreme case, if something fumbles, like we talk about it, we coach and we problem solve and we figure it out and things go on, and generally it doesn't affect anything. I really do assume people learn through their mistakes, right. And so if you, maybe it goes to patience, right? If you, like, I'm not telling you anything that anyone who doesn't read a business book doesn't know, but if you don't let people make the mistakes and learn from them, then they never get better. The organization doesn't get better. And the worst thing, I actually read this, Bill Gates said this maybe 20, 30 years ago. Like if you fire people who make mistakes, then the knowledge that they gain that you paid for is now out of the organization. You can't benefit from it. And so I'm probably overly patient on folks making mistakes. But also I do try. I've certainly had people who I've worked with who like just not working out, can't do the job, and usually you can diagnose that probably in 6-8 weeks. I figure it takes that long to give them enough of enough runs, right? Enough at-bats to determine that that they're not going to be able to do the job, and then I try to have the conversation pretty fast. I don't like when these things lag on forever, but I would say the biggest constraint I have around that is other people have made commitments to folks, and so I try to be respectful of those commitments, and I'd say sometimes I probably could be a little less patient.
Noted.
Hey, Will, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
How long does it take you to trust, and how many strikes do I get?
You are out of them. But we have a contractual obligation to one another. So,
but he loves you, John.
Yeah,
that's all I need to hear. That is all I need to hear. Well, we talked last time about how I lost 2 podcast recordings, so there's at least 3 strikes because those 2 are up. All right, let's switch.
So, real kryptonite moments. Ken, anything here that you want to point out or agreed with, or want to highlight for the audience here? This is about leadership traits under stress and being vulnerable.
Yeah, I think the not always sufficiently attentive to detail and follow up, I think is something that gets in my way, still gets in my way a little bit, especially as I've gravitated towards startup environments. I've got to be, as I said, I've got to be really careful. There's a fair bit of overhead, both time and attention that kind of goes for me checking my work. I really don't like doing it. I'd rather have somebody else check my work, frankly. But I did have like a disastrous experience. My first job out of my PhD, we were at a big investment bank. I was at a big consulting firm, kind of one of these white glove places, that cared about how you dress, and walked into we were at an investment bank. You could imagine also a pretty high stress environment, big, think like Goldman Sachs kind of place. We were doing a review. It doesn't matter what we were doing, but while there, I put together a spreadsheet and I just sent it out. And then one of the clients actually checked my math, and they were like, "You can't trust this stuff. You need to be careful." Like basically he painted my flaw he painted the whole consulting firm with my error, and so that was scarring, right? I was like, oh well, I mean, not only did I kind of hurt my own reputation, which whatever it was, what it was, but he used it to impinge the credibility of the whole firm. and so that wound up being like, oh, look, like your mistakes actually are somewhat owned by your organization. So you really do need to take that stuff seriously.
That's gotta hurt as a youngin'. Oh, you probably weren't that young, but you were fresh out of academics. Yeah.
I think I was probably 34. But I'll also say the consulting firm was super understanding, and they were not like, they didn't take me out to the woodshed. I mean, I got a little talking to, but a very fair, like, don't do that again. It's your point, maybe, Will, about second chances. Like, I don't think that wasn't why I left that firm, right? Not over that incident. That no one ever knew about that incident ever again. I suspect.
I want to dig into that second bullet there, and I want you to explain to me what you mean. I often think that I don't need to deal with giving feedback. What are you driving at there? I want to understand that a little bit, and why that's a weakness or kryptonite.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, look, if I'm having some kind of interpersonal challenge, so I have a strong personality, and I'm not I wouldn't say I'm necessarily difficult to deal with, but I do rub some people the wrong way, and as people rub me the wrong way. But when people rub me the wrong way, as opposed to me talking to them about it, I'm just like, let's let it go. Like maybe I'm overly patient, right? Maybe 3, 4, 10 weeks later it'll get better. And in my experience, it rarely gets better, right? You're better off just dealing with it. When the first moment you have the thought, maybe the second moment is the time to deal with that stuff. Again, it's like about, I'm like, well, they're figuring me out. They're going to change. I don't really see very much of that, frankly. I should be more proactive when there is some kind of interpersonal. I don't even think it's conflict. I just think it's style, right? That when that stuff happens, probably should just deal with it more head on.
Well, number one, I think to your point, they deserve that feedback. And number two, when you say, well, I don't really want to deal with that. We'll wait and see if it gets better. And I'm going to put it away or dismiss it. It doesn't go away. It just hangs, and then it builds. And, I own a small business with my wife, Amy. She owns the business as the majority owner. It's the two of us. Hi, Amy. And she is my business partner and my wife, and we parent our children together, right? So it's complex. And she is one who is very willing to tell me pretty quickly, no, I don't like that, and here's why. And my default mechanism is to internalize that and say, I'm not going to deal with that. That'll get better, right? So I'm seeing that same flaw that you and I are talking about here. And she'll come to me later and say, you let that build up. It ended up in this challenging situation. It's unpleasant to tell me something I'm not going to want to hear, but go ahead and tell me what I don't want to hear, and let's be done with it and move on, and we'll work together better, and the business will be better as a result. And that is not an easy lesson to learn. You and I both have great to show for it.
Yeah, no, and I intellectually know it. 100% know it. Doesn't help me.
when that stress is on or pressure is up, yes, John.
No, finish. I'm just raising.
When that happens, you're going to default to your habits. You're gonna fall back on your weaknesses that are learned behavior. And one of the things about this OED analysis and these podcasts is, maybe just have people listening to us have these conversations. It makes them think. Maybe it makes us think and get just a little bit, a modicum better about the way that we handle ourselves when we're in those difficult situations, so we don't keep stepping in that mud hole over and over again.
Love it,
John.
Well, so I'm feeding Will you something for the next segment because I know you won't be ready for it. But can you think of any of how these either strengths or better kryptonites came into your life when you were a roadie in your concert career, and maybe just elaborate on that a little bit, putting you on the spot.
Yeah, interesting. So for those, I'm going to just give a little background. So in my early 20s, maybe mid 20s, up till the time I was about 25, I spent some time touring with large rap bands and rock bands. And I was an audio engineer mostly, although I did some tour management as well, which I'm not really a job I'm well suited for because it's a very detail oriented job, and I'm not that detail.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah. But the detail oriented piece actually came up in the audio stuff, not infrequently. There are things that need to happen when you're putting up a sound system in an arena, and largely these are not complex things, right? But it's a complicated set of procedures, but any given thing is actually fairly simple. And one day I was hanging a sound system, a cluster in some arena, and we did what we do, work with union guys, we're just getting it going, we put the thing up, and it gets up there. I'm like, it doesn't look exactly right. I mean, I'd just been doing this a while, and I just kind of looked at the cluster. I was like, something looks weird. And so I brought it down, which like everyone's like, ooh, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do this and not worry about being judged. And when I brought it down, I inspected the fittings up on the they call them bumpers. I looked at the fitting on the bumpers, and there was one of the fittings that I didn't close properly, and it was on me. Right, I definitely did it, and I fixed it and sent it up. And it was a kind of a moment where you're like, hey, if you don't watch the details, like if that cluster had come down on people, like it would have come down on people's heads, and maybe possibly. I like to think that someone else would have noticed it as well. But I'm really grateful that I noticed it, brought it down, fixed it, and I didn't have to worry like, oh my, if that thing had come down, it would have made not just made the papers, but it would have been a really
criminal. Awesome story, guys. What did we learn, Will?
Wow.
I just fed you one.
I learned. What's that?
I just fed you something new about Ken.
Oh, about his being a roadie?
You just learned that.
That's too easy.
That's what segment we're in today.
That was a spoon feed.
We're recording, right?
Of course I know that.
Okay. Will, what'd you learn today?
We're a work in progress. I learned that you and Ken are pandemic buddies that have a work history goes back a long way, and that even though he knew you, he still decided to do business with you. Much like I did, right? So we're both risk takers.
Yeah. Interesting. I learned, I knew this, but I learned, so I will never say that the pandemic has a silver lining. That's ridiculous. It was awful, but certainly some good things have come out of it. So Will, you and I meeting, I think we met like 3 days in when you guys were in a bit of a business trouble. And then Ken, I love how you say that, rekindling our relationship during the pandemic was a highlight for you. I feel the same. So that's neat. And sorry if that was what you were going to say, what you learned today. What did you learn today, Will? I mean, Ken. Sorry.
I learned that apparently I look a lot like Will.
You know what? I need new glasses. Oops.
Yeah. I got a face for radio.
Nice.
Yeah. I think that Will, I think, really reinforced my need to be more communicative. I think that's something that I'm going to take away and think on more. Because it's clear this is it's 20 years. Like how much more patient you're going to be on this particular behavior, right? Like comes a time when it's like, all right, maybe it's time to make a change there. And I'd say that I'm in a new role as a CEO, although not my first time, but trying to get things off on a good fit and kind of not make some of the same mistakes I've made before. Full stop. So that's where I'll leave it.
Awesome. Great.
Thank you.
This is where we put our guest on the spot, sort of. We green roomed it. But Ken, you have anybody who you would like to nominate to be on the show at a future date?
Yeah. I think George Clooney would be awesome.
Great.
I'll have my people contact.
I was thinking about that too.
As a backup, is there anyone that you know that you can nominate?
Sure. So one of my partners in my new business is this guy, Joe Zawadzki. Joe is awesome. I think of him as somebody, and I think he would agree. He has amazing superpowers. He's just an amazingly talented person. But at the same time, like has some areas, has some kryptonite that he,
Yeah.
I think, would easily. One of his superpowers is just his self-knowledge, right?
I
So,
totally agree with that. And I've known Joe as long as you have, and I would agree. And I think he'll be a great guest. So, Joe Z, your people will be hearing from our people. Guys, that is a wrap. That was a really great show. Ken, something you don't know is that Will and I have actually been discussing and experimenting with elongating. We've got some feedback that we should dig in a little bit. So I thought today was, Will, a good bridge into that. The only thing left that I have to say is I'm John Lane.
I'm Will Barfield.
And we're a work in
Work in
progress.
Progress.
Ken, thank you so much. We know you're super busy. Appreciate you being on.
Great to meet
and
you,
I'm
Ken.
Ken Rona.
Yes.
Why not?
Not
Jump in.
Kenneth. Not Kenneth Rona.
No, do not call him Kenneth. Great. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.